Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Carol Look is a psychotherapist, founding EFT master, best-selling author, international speaker, and creator of the Yes Code. It's her signature coaching method. She combines her traditional training as a psychotherapist with clinical hypnosis and advanced applications of emotional freedom technique, or EFT, for unprecedented results. Well, Carol, welcome. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to your telling us about your new book, The Yes Code. This Transforming Sabotage into Success as the subtitle. It's a delightful book. Thank you for sending me a copy. I'm very glad to be able to have this conversation with you. And I hope you can let us know, what brought you into the process of writing this book and the key points you hope people take away from it.
After years and years of working on myself, right, and seeing it in my practice and seeing people get continually frustrated with themselves, I thought, wait, we've got to back up and say, criticizing yourself for your sabotage behaviors and start figuring them out. Because that's how people come to me. I'm so sick and tired of my fill in the blank, procrastination, my addictions, my people pleasing that gets me in trouble. And we really have to change that model and say, well, is the criticizing and beating yourself up doing you any good? No. Well, then let's ask the right questions and get to the bottom of it. And out of my own frustration, that's what happened for me. I just kept digging and digging and digging until I went, oh, got it. Now I get why I would do these, why I would get in my own way when I say consciously, of course I want to be successful. Of course I want to do A, B, C, and then not follow through. It's very frustrating. When you're in it and you're the person, it is frustrating and you feel critical of yourself, but it's time to change that around. So I had lots of stories, lots of personal experience, and dug into my own history, have, of course, for years doing that, to really figure out, how do we change this? How do we move forward differently around our sabotage behavior?
Well, and one of the things that you do in the book that I really enjoy when people do it is you put plenty of your own story in there. So it's a person would have to work really hard to miss that. And it makes it these tools that you've used and work for yourself, and now you're sharing that with others.
Yes, there was a lot of information. There was a lot of material from my own life, and we all have it, right? But we uncover it in layers. So I've been in the field a long time, as you have, and it's, the first decade you're a psychotherapist, you don't uncover everything. In the first decade of getting help for yourself, you don't uncover everything. So it was a process, Dr. Tim. Let's just say that. It was a long process and a very, very satisfying one. That's probably answers the first question too. Why did I want to write this for other people? Because it's super satisfying to get it and to figure it out and to be on the other side and to have compassion for yourself.
And then to have the flexibility to choose differently, right? Instead of being driven by these unconscious impulses. And, while you say we've all got our stuff, and that's true to a certain level, there's also periods of time in some of our lives where it seems like there's like a Gatling gun of, challenges being spit at us. And one of the toughest things for me is when I'm working with somebody in a situation like that is to help them understand this too shall pass, yes. Right? Even if it goes 10 times longer than you thought you could tolerate it, we're going to get through this and probably far better than we ever imagined. And yet we can't figure out how that's going to happen at the conscious logical level. And so, perhaps you could start us off by giving us an overview of what you think is the effective mechanism that makes the EFT tapping such a useful tool for us.
Well, they've really done the research now. In the beginning, we were all excited about it, and I wasn't even in the beginning of the field. We were thrilled and excited, and our clients would say, this is amazing. I quit smoking. I lost weight. I don't have these issues with my relationship anymore. But there was no research to back it up. So we were enthusiastic, and that's lovely, but it didn't really cut it with doctors and psychiatrists, even though they would send us people. And then the research started coming out looking at the curative agent of tapping on acupuncture points that calms down the fight, flight, or freeze response in your brain. And that is what we do, is we bring up a topic that frustrates us, hurts us, distresses us. Bring up a topic, so we open the file, then we pair it with the tapping, which calms down that file that's open, which is agitation, stress, upset. That's the pairing that happened. Because I've had people say, oh, this is just placebo. If it's just placebo, great, let's keep using it. But it's not. They have found out that it's not. That's not how it works. So we're really getting into the amygdala in the brain, right? The smoke alarm that gets hijacked when we're upset. The curative agent, as they say, as David Feinstein will say, the curative agent is tapping on the points and getting into that part of your brain to do some rewiring. As I said in the beginning, we were like, oh, this is so wonderful, and isn't it great? And so feels better. That's lovely, but it wasn't enough. So now they've really studied and done studies on post-traumatic stress disorder and on cravings and on pain relief and on, other issues. And the studies are all coming out saying, oh, no, this is this is not placebo, and it's much better than other techniques.
And you mentioned David Feinstein and his wife, Donna, and Gary Craig did a book together, The Energy Psychology. And they might have another one after that. But so he's a psychologist who has found tremendous benefit in this work and other mind-body energy work. And as you say, has been involved at least in monitoring the research, if not doing his own.
So Gary Craig started the whole EFT version, which is the simplified algorithms compared to what was a little more complicated way back when, where if you had
thought field therapy and those things, yeah.
You had a different issue, you would tap on different points, and Gary just said, forget it, I'm going to do the same routine every time. But he didn't do the research, but David has been involved, David and Donna has been involved in the research, and so is Dr. Peter Stapleton in Australia. And it's exciting. It's exciting to read it and just feel that upliftment that people are, agencies, hospitals, they've always been involved, but now to have the research backing it is gratifying for sure.
It's what you're describing is that there's a conditioned response that I can build in myself. Because right now, if I bring up a memory of something distressing from the past, the unconditioned response is I get flooded with, the stress hormones, and maybe I'm in the stress response or all the way up into the fight or flight response. What you're suggesting is that bringing that consciously to the surface, here is this upset that I have physically, mentally, or emotionally, and I'm going to pair that with a thought that it might get better, even though I don't know how. And then I'm going to do this breathing and tapping, which brings on a rest and digest kind of response, the parasympathetic response. And over time, that can become a new conditioned response to having that thought come up of whatever this situation was that was traumatic.
Very quickly, it can rewire response. That's what they found that was so shocking in the beginning. Is I was part of the Veterans Trauma Week with Gary Craig. I don't know how many years ago that was. And it was shocking. I didn't know how to respond. It was so fast. So it doesn't take months and months of rewiring and let's pair this with a new technique and let's pair this with the tapping. When done right and you get to that trigger, it's very, very fast. So I think that's part of, in a way, in the beginning, that even hurt it a little bit because we were all saying, this is the most wonderful thing we've ever seen. And it was, and there was no science to back it up. Now I can still say this is the best tool I've ever found. And now there's science. Now there's science to back it up. And when you have a veteran say to you, I've never felt this way. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to hurt myself anymore. And yes, the memories are true and I remember them, but I'm not feeling sick over them. You listen. As you know, in your work, you listen, your ears perk up.
Yeah. And there's the goal for most of us who are in this work trying to help others is to have them reach that position where they feel differently about something that minutes ago was very connected in their minds to tremendous upset or avoidance. And to come back to the focus of your book, why did you choose the Yes Code as a title?
The Yes Code is the simplified version of my coaching and therapy, which is clarify your vision, get really clear about it, then ask those questions. If that's your vision and that's what you want, why aren't you there yet? Then the tool of EFT comes in to clear the blocks, clear your sabotage, clear what's in your way, and then find out what your next step is. What is your next yes? So that's just what I use with clients and in workshops. And it just cuts out a lot of extra steps, cuts out a lot of noise, and just says, hey, let's just cut to the chase here. What do you want? What's in your way? And how are we going to get there?
There's a kind of an ongoing, I'll call it a discussion, debate between people who say that when you have a script for tapping on something, it's the best thing ever, or the people who say, no, the scripts don't really work for me. I need to have it, individualized to myself. Can you talk a little bit about your position on that?
So, yes. So the scripts are great if you can be flexible and say, well, that wording that Carol wrote out is close, but not exactly what I'm going through. And you can switch the words and you can tweak the words and say, that's the topic. I'm in the ballpark here, but I'd like to tweak it a little bit. Other people, I had someone this week saying, I cannot do what you do by myself in my living room. Okay, of course not, because I've got a second pair of eyes and ears for you. So I hear and see things that someone can't do on themselves. But you can really get far with scripts. You can get far with videos and scripts and what's in the book and say, okay, I'm in the right area and that's close, because it's about feelings, right? So when I was working in the weight loss part of this field, people would say, well, you can't possibly understand me. You've never been obese. Now, for me, I was 25 pounds heavier and that didn't feel good and didn't look good and I didn't like it, but I was not medically obese. And I would say to them, no, I'm not and have not been. However, we have both felt shame. We have both felt guilt. We have both felt rage. We have both felt deep pain and trauma. And that would drop their resistance to me being the one helping them, because I didn't know what I couldn't possibly get in their shoes. Because people get hooked on what's the trauma, what's the problem, smoking, weight, relationship issues, yelling at your kids. They get focused on that
or form an identity from it.
Instead of, well, what do we have in common here? That's why the scripts work. So you can work on your guilt when someone else is working on guilt, even if your guilt is about something completely different. So, would I always like to have a personalized psychotherapist or a trained EFT practitioner in front of me working on me? Absolutely. I mean, I think we all would, but the scripts work, and figuring out your own way to do it really works. I love helping people with that. Sometimes in my office, they'll say, oh, I couldn't possibly do it, and I don't know how to do it. And I say, hey, I want you to take me through one round of tapping on your issue. And they're like, oh, I couldn't possibly. And I just walk them through it in one round. And they say, oh, that wasn't as hard as I thought. But they have to be in that seat and do it on me. And then they say, oh, okay, I could do that. It's close. Our perfectionism gets involved in this too, of course. Right?
Well, and you list 7 of the most common, self-sabotaging behaviors, and perfectionism is number 2 on the list.
It's a big one. one.
But I really like that the ideas that you've pulled together here, because while it may not cover everybody, there's a lot of commonality. When you list these 7, procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, addictions, clutter, relationship drama, and self-care neglect, that may not cover everything for everyone, but boy, everybody's got something of those 7 in their lives to one level or another. Maybe not to the point where they consider it a problem, but there's going to be a way to identify with so much of what you brought out in the book. That's one of the big benefits I see.
Thank you. And somebody might say, or they might not identify as an addict or alcoholic in any way, but they're spending 3 hours on Facebook when they could be doing something else. So there's an addictive quality. And maybe someone isn't a full-fledged people pleaser, but you can see how they do not honor themselves and their feelings around their boss or around their father, their mother, somebody specific in their family. So you can see shades of all of this. There's pathological procrastination, and then there's just a little bit of procrastination around tax time or around, a project you need to send in. So there's we're always human beings. We're complex, and we're always on a continuum with our behaviors.
Well, and one of the things that I think is so beneficial about a book like yours is if people are willing to read it, they'll discover they're not alone. That's one of the big things. But then there's this very well thought out kind of a template for beginning to look at where I might be stuck and why. And you go through, so many things like the procrastination being the biggest first one you have. And then you've got examples of people you've worked with and the template for analyzing where they're stuck, and then step by step, the template for tapping through it and giving people the scripts for tapping through it.
Yes, and I find that people are always surprised. So the feedback I've been getting about the book is, Carol, I don't feel alone, and thank you for sharing your story. I thought, of course, my story, there's not enough trauma, there's not enough terrible things that happen, but I was raised by alcoholic parents, and a lot happens with alcoholism. And you get messages with alcoholism. As much as my parents loved us, and I knew it, and I felt it, and we had so many advantages, then they would drink, and that gives a message. Then they wouldn't stop. Then my mother would go to rehab and come home and drink again after a rehabilitation facility for 30 days, right? So you get messages that way. So people would have said, I don't feel so alone, and no, our stories are not the same, but I felt lost also, some version of lost or in pain, right? And then they're always surprised by the questions and that they're afraid to be visible. They're always so surprised. Wow, I'm afraid to shine? I didn't really get that. Is that why I'm putting a lid on myself? Oh, my comfort zone is because I don't want to stand out again. There's always an again, right? I don't have to know them, and they can say, oh, I'm afraid to stand out. And I will ask, what happened last time? And they'll say, how did you know? Because you would not be afraid of shining and standing out now if there wasn't a significant event in your life where you got hurt, got in trouble, scolded, target of jealousy. So we all have these issues from our past in 6th grade, 5th grade, high school, college, doesn't matter. There's something back there that says you are safer, because the main issue in the book is talking about safety, meaning sabotage behaviors are to keep us safe. Start there. Then the shame goes away. Then you don't have to scold yourself. Then you don't have to be on yourself. Here I go again. You can just say, oh, I've been trying to keep myself safe in this odd, interesting, unhelpful way, but it is helpful. And once they get that, something really shifts in their view of themselves and their view of the behavior. Our culture is very obsessed with behavior and misses often that the beliefs and the feelings are what drive the behavior. So if you want different results, we have to go to the feelings and the beliefs. Yeah, clean up the clutter. Sure, lose the weight. Sure, put the alcohol down. But what about the beliefs and the feelings that are driving?
Right, that were driving the whole situation. As you just alluded to, if you don't clear that up, you pay professionals to come in and take away all the clutter, wait 6 months, it'll be back.
6 weeks. I had a client who was in debt, $50,000, and someone paid it off for her. And it took 3 months to get back up. And she was shocked. I was not. I've seen it, right? I've seen it. And, we have to get to that bottom line. You were talking about beliefs in the beginning, and I always say beliefs are compulsive. We can't help it. So the way someone might be a compulsive drinker or compulsive gambler, they can't, compulsive means you can't control the beginning or the end of something. Right? You've lost control over that. Well, our beliefs are compulsive too. We have to follow them. So if you can tweak your beliefs, a negative belief would be, I'm not worth it. I'm not worth the time and attention. I don't deserve this. I'm not something enough. I'm not smart enough, good enough, young enough, something. And if you can tweak
it's too late. I can't undo all the damage. There's not enough time left in my life.
You start switching those, you cannot help but follow the new beliefs. So when I ask the questions and they come up with, I didn't realize I was so convinced of this. Again, things start to percolate. Things start to happen when you ask the right questions and get to the bottom line, rather than, I need an organizer to throw the stuff, all my junk. I need someone to put me on. I need a nutritionist to put me on a diet. I need to just put the alcohol down and stay away from bars. Well, a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, it's a good start. And yet, if I don't get to how whatever the thing is that I've labeled as a symptom, if I don't uncover how that's actually been a solution, then it will probably come back as a solution and look to be, to me, to be a failure or a symptom of failure. And one of the things that we, especially in trauma work, that they talk about people who remember all kinds of gory details about a trauma, but it just keeps coming back. And so what if you conceptualize that I'm remembering all kinds of horrible things about it, except what was the actual worst part for me, right? The concept of the T-1, in a countdown right before the biggest thing. And I remember everything right up to the last moment before the worst thing happens. I don't remember the actual worst thing because some part of my mind has made the decision to say, Tim, this is too much for you to handle. You wouldn't survive remembering. So I'm stuck in the loop of remembering all of the gory details right up to that moment and then shutting down. And when I can calm the system with something like the EFT tapping and reassure myself that, wait a minute, if I've already lived through it, can't really hurt me any more than it already has. And there's probably this error in thought behind this loop of pain that just keeps replaying. And if I can get myself with a coach like you or with a book like yours, if I can get myself to be willing to use the tool and bring down that agitation and that overstimulation in my central nervous system, and then invite this thing. How do I invite it? Well, you ask questions like you've got all over your book, right? These beautiful questions that are laid out in terms of themes for different problems like the procrastination or the people pleasing or the perfectionism or the addiction issue. So the book's been out since October of last year of 24. So what's some of the most rewarding feedback you've had so far about the book?
I would say people saying they read the questions and were shocked about their own answers. So I recommend they read the questions, what's the upside of staying stuck? And people are like, don't be silly. There's no upside. And I say, ask again, right? And they're shocked by what comes up. They're not horrified by their answers. They're like, I didn't know I was operating that way. And some people even take it with trauma. It's not a trauma book, but you can use EFT beautifully for trauma. And they'll say, I didn't realize I was using the trauma loop that you just described and using that to keep myself safe. Because if I get stuck in those 10 details, I can stay away from the truth, my perception of the truth, which is that I'm afraid what it means about me. So this idea of the safety, people are saying to me and writing me, the aha moments on the safety, because the other batch of questions is, and what's the downside of reaching your goal? And I've been trying to reach my goal for 10 years. How would you tell me there's a downside? Have you asked yourself the question? And they do, and then they find out information. And then, as I said earlier, people saying, thank you for sharing your story because you have been through it. You haven't been through what I've been through. And maybe, my traumas are not as bad at all. The suffering, the feelings, being lost, a lot of grief, a lot of death. People can relate to that, and they have. So that's been very rewarding.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned safety, as I was reading the book, I have several people in my caseload right now who are really stuck, really feeling overwhelmed, really agitated when they come up against their procrastinations. And being able to kind of shine the spotlight on this question of safety for them has been a real eye-opener, right? Because they're just looking at it in terms of my lack, my unworthiness, my lack of skills or resources. That's why I'm feeling overwhelmed, rather than, guess what? Staying in this overwhelmed state is protecting you from something else over here. So what is it that I can do to acknowledge how what I'm doing is keeping me safe and the ways it's keeping me safe, and then perhaps find some different ways to enact that same level of safety that are a little bit more adaptive?
I think when people hear the concept around safety and protection, and that all these behaviors, even though your family's criticizing you, your boss is upset with you, you're upset with yourself, that the concept of you're just trying to keep yourself safe does loosen this grip of the criticism and the shame. Something about it is like, oh, and then I'll say to them, 100% of human beings and animals want to feel safe. So you're just doing what you're programmed to do, and that's never going to change. What you need to see differently is what is safe and what's unsafe. So now that someone says, oh, I wasn't safe as a child in all these instances, and they'll say, but I'm older now, and I don't have to hold on to the old belief, and I'm the one who keeps myself safe now. A lot of people bring forward this feeling of lack of safety with other humans because they haven't resolved the trauma. Bessel van der Kolk says trauma is resolved in community with other people. It cannot be resolved and healed on your own because trauma's happened with other people. So they need to be resolved and healed in a community, even if the community is 5 people, it doesn't have to be huge. So this idea of safety and protection helped me, certainly, because it got my self-criticism. Oh, I shouldn't be a perfectionist and I shouldn't, took that away and got me curious. Well, why on earth would I procrastinate in this scenario again? Why on earth would I keep myself playing small? I don't want to be small. How is that behavior protecting me from something that I haven't looked at yet? And so people are just repeatedly saying things like that, saying that really opened up a door where I could walk in and take a look around, shine the flashlight, instead of saying, oh, there I go again. Oh, there I've done it again. And see, I told you I wasn't fill in the blank. What, good enough? My father was right. He said I wouldn't amount to anything. Whatever the phrases are that we heard, sometimes still hear in our head, we've got to release those. And the safety conversation has really helped a lot of people. And as I say, it certainly helped me.
Well, and I get a lot of, in reading the book, it echoes back to Diederik Wolzak's work. He's got a choose again worksheet where essentially he's identifying a negative emotion in the moment and then asking oneself, okay, when's one of the first times that I felt this particular flavor of this emotion? And he says, just go with it. You ask the question, like you're saying, ask these questions, and something will answer. And then if I remember, this is a lot like what happened when I was 8 years old, and this was happening in 3rd grade or whatever. If I go back and pretend that I'm interviewing my 8-year-old self, and I ask the question, Tim, what did you make it mean about yourself that the teacher called you out in front of the class? And so the meaning about me that got downloaded back then is part of what drives my response as an adult, whenever that memory or trauma gets reactivated. And instead of sitting here like a competent therapist with a doctorate and 50 years of experience doing therapy, I'm sitting here as a scared 8-year-old with only those resources and maybe stammering, maybe fumbling. And it's in that recognition of what I made it mean about me that only comes out with this softening, perhaps the EFT tapping to get the whole system calmed down, and then the asking with this willingness to hear what might bubble up. That's transformative, and that's all through your book.
Thank you. I want another question that I'll ask people if they're on Zoom or in front of me or at a workshop. I can see something in their face that turns, right? You see that, you know what that's like. Just a slightest shadow comes over. And I'll say, how old do you feel right now? And they'll always look surprised. And I'll say 8, why? Or 10, well, how did you, why? Well, you see it in their face and you can feel it energetically. And then they can unpack what happened when they were a kid and say, oh, I, as you said, instead of acting like a competent psychologist with an incredible degree and experience, they're regressing to this immaturity.
Instantly.
Small child, instantly. And the relief of that, when people say, the number of times people will say, I had no idea it was connected to that. I love that phrase in EFT, right? I had no idea this had anything to do with what so-and-so, the teacher said when I was in 6th grade. I love that phrase because that means we're on to something. we're getting there. We're getting to the reasons. The real.
Yeah. When you're talking about that, I have memory of a couple people I work with, and if they're crying about something that's actually happening in their life today, there's a certain set of tones and volume to it. And when they're crying because they've been triggered to something from the past, dramatically different. I can hear it instantly. And when I can bring their awareness to that, if they're willing, they can start to hear it. What happens most often is they get defensive, and even though I'm holding up the mirror so they can see, look at this, you're clearly feeling like, a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old. And, it's in your tone of voice, it's in the volume, it's in the shakiness. And you were crying about this thing earlier, and it was just very different. It was very solid. There's actual tears without the voice quivering. And so when people have that one of the people I like to work with is Dr. Michael Rice, and he talks about willingness being the cosmic grease. If we can, willingness to come up within us, or if we got a really good coach like you or the book like yours, we might get enticed to allow willingness to start coming in. The questioning is so critical. It's like Rilke talks about how we must learn to live in that questioning state without demanding an answer. And that's another great aspect of your book, is it's just loaded with questions at every level. And if people are willing to pick up your book and find the target behaviors that are self-sabotaging behaviors that are right biggest up for them, and then start reading these questions, the answers are going to start coming to them.
They do start coming, and that's what's fun, and that's what's gratifying, and that's what I loved it about working on myself. I always say I would never ask you something or do something for you or introduce you to something that I have not done on myself. I have been the guinea pig for my work for 30 years, which is appropriate and healthy. And boy, did I learn a lot. And I'll say these questions have been around forever, but no one ever asked me these questions about my behavior. No one said, Carol, you're trying to protect yourself. No, I'm not. No one ever asked. So turning them around to the sabotage behavior, I just found really helpful and took, as I said, that shame away, took the shoulds away. When someone is defensive, which they can be, when I'll say, oh, what's the downside to reaching your goal? And that defensiveness comes up. All I know is they had to defend themselves a lot as a child. They had to go into that space. They were criticized and accused and scolded. And so working with that is interesting. And eventually we hope to, get them around and say, okay, well, just get, if there was a reason that you are using food, alcohol, cigarettes, boyfriends, whatever it is, addictively, what would you be trying not to feel? Well, I don't know. Right? The first answer is, I don't know. What do you think could be underneath? It took me a long time to get to the extent of grief that I didn't know I had in my life. How do you not know? Because you keep going, because I was happy, because I was competent, because I had a great life. But underneath the eating and the smoking, I didn't drink because my family was alcoholic. And I thought, I'm not going down that road. What did that do for me? It just meant I
had to find another way. Yeah.
Just went the other way. So finding out that the grief, and once I got through the grief, the compulsive wanting to use something went away. Now, instantly, no. But the grief, I also talk about, trauma versus, big trauma, T, as you work with, and little T trauma. What my bigger trauma was waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's helped a lot of people, them saying, but I didn't have a car accident and I wasn't beaten and nobody died when I was 10. And no, for me either. However, looking over my shoulder and waiting for the next thing to happen set up my nervous system and set me up to be hypervigilant and waiting and looking and what's going to happen and can't be safe.
There we go. The safe word, right? It's not safe. So for some reason, I'm not going to be safe unless I keep that heightened level of agitation.
Which over the years can really do a number on your immune system. That's the other door. We talk about doors in EFT. Gary Craig always talked that way, which was great. If you have a symptom, go in the door of the symptom or go in the door of the emotion or go in the door of what's going on now that you feel limited by your diagnosis, right? Go in different doors. And for me, going in those different doors was really, really helpful. Just saying, wait a minute, I have been hyper vigilant for years. What happened is I ended up with a tumor here and a hemangioma here and a polyp here and all sorts of medical stuff quite early that I wasn't totally on board yet with the physical and emotional being all connected because I was in corporate at the time. But I got there quickly saying, what's going on in my body? Is this a stress response? Just because I could stay up and not get a lot of sleep and I had terrible insomnia, just because I didn't think I needed a lot of sleep doesn't mean I should have done that.
Exactly.
I lived without that. And insomnia was the first thing that I cleared in myself doing tapping. And it was like, oh, something's really happening here. And all I didn't focus on my own insomnia. I was tapping with everybody else. I was all excited and enthusiastic in the beginning. And I was a hypnotist also. And when you're a hypnotist, people come to you they say, you're my last resort, smoking, weight loss, anxiety, panic disorder. That's why they come to you when you're a hypnotist. And I would tap with them. New clients, old clients, I just tap. Oh, yes, I'll do hypnosis. And I have found this new tapping technique. And it calmed down my general anxiety and stress and hypervigilance enough that I started sleeping. And I wasn't even targeting insomnia. I woke up one day and said, I fell asleep last night. I think I went to bed early last night. And it started, and I, saw the pattern, but I wasn't even identifying it as the big problem for my immune system or my functioning at work or anything. It was just, oh yeah, I have insomnia. Do you? I wasn't seeing it that way.
And when we're at a certain younger age, the negative effects of that aren't so blatant, right? They're not right there in our face. But over time, depleted immune system and that depleted reservoirs of energy start showing up in physical disruptions. And so I love that you put so much of that in your story about that in the book. And it's a real gift to people. Before we got started, you mentioned, it's a hard stop for you coming up here. So let me ask you to get centered and just do a quick review of what we've talked about so far, what I've asked about, and if there's something in that you want to go back and highlight, or something, an aspect of either your work with people or the book that we haven't even covered yet. Just take a minute and get centered and let me know what you want to make sure we get in here.
Thank you. What I feel bubbling up is the hope that I felt because I changed so many things. The hope that people who I've worked with over 30 years in I don't know how many countries, all over the world, and all the other practitioners doing this kind of work, the hope that they are told about and people come up to them or write them emails. The hope is in transforming sabotage into success. That's really the key here. And I don't want people to say, oh, well, it's not for me, or my issues aren't really, they don't quite fit into those categories, because there is so much hope here. I mean, there's so much we could focus on that is not hopeful, but there is so much to change that's exciting. That's exciting about your health and about your relationships. Relationship drama is a big one in the book, and people don't understand why 3 relationships, 3 husbands, 3 wives in a row are the same personality, because they're not asking the question. And sometimes you have to hit bottom before you say, I'm done, I give, what's going on? And so I think hope is the message that I want. The transforming can happen, and can happen with scripts, can happen in a book when you keep with it. I do my tapping is part of my self-care routine every single day. I didn't used to do it every day. Tim, I would do a workshop and I'd be doing my clients, and then I would, work on tapping maybe when I thought there was something really big. That's not the way to address your life. You need self-care routines, and I speed walk and I meditate and I tap. And you need routines that make you feel better every day, not just when the chips are down. And I think that's something very common in our culture as well. When you're in crisis, call a therapist, call a coach. When you're in crisis, you better do your meditation. But it's those daily practices that can really change your life. So even if someone says, I don't sabotage myself, I don't have those, I'm not an addict, I don't procrastinate, you can still go to the website and get the free downloads of the 9 videos I have, and you can learn how to tap and tap for anything else in your life. I make it really simple, and EFT is super simple, so I don't have anything to do with that, but you choose a target, plug it in, do the tapping, use the curative agent, as David would say, and tap on the acupuncture points on your face and body, and release and rewire. And you'll really get, as you know, you will get incredible, important, and really exciting results. That's what I keep going back to. Here I am 30, however many years later after EFT, and still getting the results that are exhilarating.
Yeah, I used to, I would teach an all-day class on EFT tapping from, 9 to 4:30 or whatever. And on Saturdays, I would do it, 2 or 3 times a year. And it would come up on a regular basis, and people would ask me, well, do you use it and how? And I say, well, what I've noticed is if I've got, so I offer it to every patient that I see in my office, because it's a tool they can be using between sessions. That isn't in lieu of therapy, but it's in support of therapy, and it's an empowering tool. And if I've got 4 or 5 patients coming in, new patients, and I'm teaching it to them and I'm tapping with them, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm got a bad dream going or something, and I remember to tap, and I tap and I'm right back to sleep and everything's great. If I've gone for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks and I'm not tapping on my own, and I don't have new people that I'm teaching, and I'm not teaching the class, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm having a bad dream and I toss and I turn, I'm up for an hour, hour and a half. The next morning I was sitting at breakfast and thinking, geez, what was that all about? And then I realized, I didn't even think to tap, right? Because it's not top of mind. The more I use it, the more benefit I get in that tapping routine. And also the secondary or tertiary level of benefit is it's going to stay top of mind for the next upset that crosses my path or that I decide is upsetting in life. And so, powerful benefits come from that sustained approach that you're talking about, making it a part of my health self-care routine.
And I also think that we get a little hooked on the tens. We start by saying on a scale of 0 to 10, where is your upset or your distress? And we get a little fixated on, this is an 8 and this is a 9. And when you tap every day, and when you tap the way we do with our clients, there are a lot of 3s and 4s that need attention. And that can be very healing for your physiology and for your emotional makeup, to not just look for the big traumas, the big thing that happened, which when you've been tapping for years and years, you've usually taken care of a lot of the traumas and the big things, but to work on something that still gets you, work on something that's a 3 or a 4. So sometimes people say, well, Carol, what do you tap on at the end of the day? You're tapping all the time with people and you've done it for years. Oh, there's always something, Tim.
Right. Especially when you just expand it to say, okay, even if it's a 2 or a 3 or a 4, I'm going to tap on it. It's powerful.
And I live in this life and have a life and family and work, and we're never going to run out of challenges, are we?
Not likely. It hasn't been my experience. I'll put it that way. I won't say that I know for sure, but it hasn't been my experience that I'm ever going to run out of stuff to choose an interpretation for that generates upset in me.
Choose. Lots of choices here. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time. I know we're hitting that hard stop, but it's a delightful book. It's The Yes Code by Carol Look. The subtitle is Transforming Sabotage into Success. Is there a preferred way that you'd like to have people reach out to you if they want to touch base or give you a comment on the book?
They are welcome to go to theyescode.com. And if they just put their name in there, they can get the freebies, all the free stuff, and then email me, carol@carollook.com. I love hearing from people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's delightful.
Thank you, Tim. It's wonderful being with you.
Carol Look is a psychotherapist, founding EFT master, best-selling author, international speaker, and creator of The Yes Code. It's her signature coaching method. She combines her traditional training as a psychotherapist with clinical hypnosis and advanced applications of emotional freedom technique, or EFT, for unprecedented results. Known for her laser-like focus and state-of-the-art approach, Carol has used EFT tapping for over 25 years to help clients release their limiting beliefs and emotional conflicts so that they can enjoy lives of exceptional success and fulfillment. Carol is a world-renowned EFT workshop presenter. She is a regularly featured energy medicine expert on leading global telesummits and documentaries.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.